During the time that she's been missing, have you looked through her room, looked through her property?
No.
When were you were aware that a car had been left behind? Were you aware of any other things that had been left behind that she'd normally have with her?
No, I couldn't find her car keys, which was strange. As they always put in the drawer in the kitchen and they weren't there. So I assumed she had her car keys with her.
Kate Wakefield Prout was born in 1952 in the ceremonial county of Gloucestershire, in the northwest of England, into a traditional family of English farmers. Her parents' names remain unknown, but it is well known that Kate's childhood was spent among the rural activities and games with her two brothers, Richard and Edward. The trio's bond remained strong over the years, but when adulthood arrived, Kate was the only one who pursued a different career path, working as a school teacher. During this period, both of her parents passed away. After settling the inheritance issues, the siblings divided the estate. By 1999, Kate, unmarried and childless, decided to retire early. She sold her share of the houses, intending to rest, enjoy the vast greenery, and spend more quality time with Richard and Edward. She also planned to indulge in her favorite hobbies, being near the beach, surrounded by animals, and arranging flowers. Kate moved to the countryside to live with her brothers, who were engaged in farming. At 48 years old, tall, blonde, green-eyed, and intellectually accomplished, Kate was very attractive. During this time, she met a younger neighbor, Adrian Prout, who was going through a difficult period after ending a long relationship and caring for his teenage daughter, Laura. Edward allowed Adrian to temporarily live in a mobile home on their property. In gratitude, Adrian helped with the farm work, and Edward admired him for his business acumen and drive. Kate and Adrian quickly hit it off, fell in love, and got married in September 2000. They bought a lovely house together but sold it 4 years later when they received an excellent offer. With the proceeds, they realized a dream by purchasing 115 hectares on the outskirts of Redmarly-d'Aboteau, a beautiful area. In 2004, the couple moved to Red Hill Farm in Redmarly, investing a significant amount of $1.2 million. The plan was for Adrian to manage the farm, continue his piping business, and organize pheasant hunting events, which were highly prized by wealthy British landowners. With Adrian's dedication and Kate's efforts in public relations and catering, their hunting events, which adhered to conservation rules to protect wildlife, became very popular. However, the harmony in their marriage began to falter when Laura, Adrian's 17-year-old daughter, moved in with them. Initially, the tensions were typical for having a teenager in the house. However, things worsened when Laura's boyfriend started spending a lot of time at their home. One day in 2006, Kate prepared an elaborate lunch for the four of them, but Laura and her boyfriend decided to eat elsewhere at the last minute. Frustrated and at her wits' end, Kate confronted them with everything she had been holding back. The argument was so intense that Laura decided not to live on the farm anymore. This incident strained Kate and Adrian's relationship further, leading to frequent and heated arguments. The situation escalated to the point where Adrian, in a fit of anger, pushed Kate against a truck. Adrian pushed Kate with such force that she hit the metal siding of a truck. Determined to leave him, she packed a bag with her essentials and went to stay with her brother Richard. However, a few weeks later, they reconciled, and Kate returned to Adrian. The peace was short-lived. On February 1, 2007, Kate called her brother Richard again, revealing that Adrian had been arrested for domestic violence. During a brutal argument, plates were thrown, hitting Kate on the head, and the confrontation continued in the garden. It ended with Adrian holding her by the neck over an empty pool, threatening to drop her. Despite mutual accusations, there were no witnesses. After this terrifying incident, Kate stayed with Richard and his wife for a considerable time. During this period, she confided in them about Adrian's controlling and abusive behavior. She revealed that despite co-owning their property, Adrian withheld her share of the income, forcing her to rely on her pension for personal expenses. Realizing the marriage was over, Richard and his wife were unaware that Kate had remained in contact with Adrian. In fact, 2 months after the pool incident, Adrian convinced her to meet face-to-face. They reconciled that night, but the happiness was short-lived, and the heated arguments resumed. Determined to protect her financial interests, Kate began documenting numerous details about her marriage in her personal diary, expressing herself in ways she had never done before. The summer of 2007 was tumultuous, and in an attempt to save their marriage, Kate planned a romantic trip to Italy, buying tickets for October. When Adrian backed out at the last minute, Kate invited her sister-in-law instead. Before leaving, Kate made arrangements to ensure Adrian was comfortable at home, including hiring a woman named Diane Bellamy to care for the dogs, plants, and day-to-day tasks. Upon returning, Kate suspected a clandestine romance between Adrian and Diane. Though Diane testified in court that it wasn't true, she admitted that Adrian had attempted to kiss her several times. One evening in late October 2007, while at a bar with friends and clients, Kate, inebriated, began airing her grievances loudly. She accused Adrian of having an affair and criticized Laura, Adrian's daughter. When Adrian tried to calm her, Kate slapped him in front of everyone. The party ended abruptly, and Kate spent the night at a neighbor's house. Following this incident, they seriously considered divorce. Kate sought legal advice and requested an updated appraisal of their shared property, which had significantly increased in value to $1.84 million. Adrian offered her $850,000 in maintenance, but on Sunday, November 4, 2007, Kate refused. She stated that the only offer she would accept, being generous, was $1.13 million, which she felt was fair. Adrian was furious, knowing that to pay her that amount, he would have to sell the land they had bought 3.5 years earlier, an option he was unwilling to consider. The next day, Monday, November 5, 2007, Kate was seen at a fruit market in Ledbury, and later, around 3:30 p.m., contacted her bank. After withdrawing $21,000, she rejected Adrian's financial settlement in the divorce negotiations. What happened next has been pieced together as follows. Around 5:30 p.m., they argued in one of the tourist lodges they offered to hunting enthusiasts on their property. Adrian was preparing for a pheasant hunt with clients scheduled for the next day. Knowing this, Kate threatened to disrupt the event and embarrass him in front of everyone unless he agreed to her demands. Furious, he remained steadfast in his position. Kate reminded him that the property was purchased largely with her father's inheritance. The argument escalated until Adrian grabbed her by the neck with both hands and squeezed with all his strength. After about 15 seconds, Kate fell to the ground, lifeless. Realizing he no longer had to divide his fortune, Adrian went to the main house, sat in a chair, poured himself a whiskey and savored it. A while later he returned, wrapped Kate's body in a curtain and some large white plastic sheets, put her body in the trunk of his truck and drove to a local bar for a few beers. By the time he returned to the car, it was dark. He then drove to a wooded area on the outskirts of their pheasant hunting grounds and dug a grave about 5 feet deep and as long. Finally, he buried the body and left. With no news from his sister and unable to reach her by phone, Richard asked a mutual friend who lived nearby to check on her. The friend found the door unlocked and Kate's car parked outside, but no sign of either Kate or Adrian. Like Richard, the friend couldn't reach them on their cell phones. Richard went to the house and waited with his friend for Adrian to return. When Adrian finally arrived, he claimed he hadn't seen Kate for days. Shocked by his response and his evident coldness, Richard pressed him. Adrian defended himself, saying he hadn't looked for her because he didn't consider her missing. He thought she was just keeping her distance. Under Richard's insistence, on November 10, 2007, Adrian reported Kate's strange absence to the police. Despite launching an extensive search of the farm and its surroundings, the authorities found no trace of Kate. The last confirmed sighting was on Monday at the fruit market. After that, nothing. Given the peaceful nature of their village and Kate's popularity with neighbors, the situation was deeply troubling. No one in the village suspected Adrian. As a wealthy, middle-aged businessman, they believed he had too much to lose to harm his wife. However, the police couldn't ignore his connection to the missing woman. On Sunday, November 11, 2007, Adrian was brought in for questioning. The police immediately noticed some peculiar details. Simultaneously, a search of the couple's property revealed that Kate had left without taking anything: no jewelry, clothes, money, or credit cards, not even her car, which was still parked there. It was highly unusual. 3 days after the initial interview, authorities began to suspect the worst. By then, they were considering several possibilities. The first was that Kate had left for some reason and, after encountering harm, was unable to return or contact her family. The second was that she had left deliberately and didn't want to be found. The final, more sinister scenario was that a crime had occurred, either an abduction or something worse. This launched one of the largest search operations in Gloucestershire, involving over 60 officers. Additionally, the same trained dogs used in the search for missing British girl Madeleine McCann were deployed. Dozens of police officers combed the grounds while helicopters equipped with infrared cameras and tactical police divers scoured the ponds. To grasp the scale and difficulty faced by the search team, the estate spanned over 250 acres, equivalent to approximately 240 American football fields, each measuring 1.32 acres. And this was only a fifth of the cultivable land, which also included at least half the area covered by woodland. Initially, officers identified over 100 areas where a body could be buried, but ultimately ruled them all out. They also searched inside Kate and Adrian's home and around the property's perimeter, using specialized dogs. Despite the challenges of searching without a body, the dog indicated a spot near the patio, which, according to its handler, suggested a body had been there at some point. This result strengthened investigators' belief that Adrian was the prime suspect, but without solid evidence, there was little they could do. Around this time, Diane ran into Adrian at a bar. Believing he was devastated like everyone else, she expressed her support. To her surprise, Adrian responded with absurd statements, claiming that Kate had been taken away without specifying by whom, and he asked her not to ask further questions. On November 27, 2007, Adrian was arrested, and simultaneously, a second search of the vast property was conducted using helicopters equipped with thermal sensors. After hours with no results, Adrian was released without charges. While outsiders believed Adrian was incapable of harming anyone, Kate's brothers suspected foul play and thought Adrian's hands were stained with blood. These suspicions seemed validated as Adrian continued his life as if nothing had happened. In fact, a month after Kate's disappearance, Adrian met Debbie Garlick, a 41-year-old divorced mother of two, at a nightclub in Staunton. They quickly developed a romance with Debbie, captivated by his personality, believing his innocence and thinking the police and justice system were wrongly accusing him. The romance thrived in the following weeks and months. In early February 2008, Diane encountered Adrian again and noticed he seemed frightened. Meanwhile, investigators found Kate's personal diary in her car, leading to Adrian's second arrest on February 19, 2008, for suspicion of murder. However, he was released on bail, and Richard and Edward begged him to confess what they believed was already obvious. Spring and summer passed, with each new season deepening the despair of Kate's loved ones, who watched in disbelief as the case seemed to dissolve without progress or answers. The stark contrast was Adrian's idyllic life with his now fiancée Debbie. In February 2009, the police informed Adrian that he was no longer a suspect. Elated, he convinced Debbie to move in with him at the property he had once shared with Kate. However, 3 weeks later, on March 10, 2009, the police knocked on the door to arrest Adrian once more. Although he was jailed for a month, he was again released on bail. Unbeknownst to him, the investigation continued quietly, and shortly after, Adrian was formally charged with the crime. This did not prevent his relationship with Debbie from progressing. Released on bail, they got engaged in June of that year, and by then, Debbie was pregnant. Their daughter was born on January 7, 2010, after a scheduled delivery. Despite the looming criminal charges and the ugly suspicions surrounding Adrian, they maintained the facade of a happy family, with Adrian portraying himself as a good father and husband. The trial began on January 21, 2010, with Adrian proclaiming his innocence. Debbie attended the hearings, bringing their weeks-old baby. One of the testimonies was from Diane, who clarified that, despite Kate's suspicions, there had never been any relationship between her and Adrian. Diane recounted how Adrian had tried to seduce her and detailed his strange behavior after Kate's disappearance. By the end of the third week, in a remarkable effort, the investigation officers convinced the jury that all evidence pointed towards Adrian. Consequently, in February 2010, Adrian Prout was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 18 years behind bars. The verdict also prevented him from profiting from Kate's will, which she had made in his name. Despite the conviction, Adrian's family, friends, neighbors, and especially his fiancée continued to believe in his innocence. They clung to the idea that without a body, there was no crime or valid accusation. Supporters rallied to free him. Laura, Adrian's eldest daughter, started a social media campaign, while Debbie's daughter from her first marriage did something similar, gathering nearly 500 signatures for his release. Debbie, holding their daughter, campaigned tirelessly and even offered a $14,000 reward for any information proving Adrian's innocence, money she had inherited from her father. Desperate to clear her partner's name, Debbie convinced Adrian to take a lie detector test. She challenged him, saying he had nothing to lose if he was innocent. Confident as always, Adrian agreed, believing he could outsmart the machine. Debbie, hopeful for his release, hired polygraph expert who visited the prison in Lancashire. Adrian appeared calm and confident, stating he was doing it for Debbie. However, Adrian failed the test, and the expert informed him of the results. The expert then called Debbie, who was shocked and in disbelief. Debbie needed answers, so she visited Adrian in prison to hear the truth from him directly. Still harboring a sliver of hope that it was all a misunderstanding, Debbie was devastated when Adrian confessed the terrible truth. In shock, she listened to his pleas not to leave him but knew she had to be resolute. The burden and anguish were immense, but Debbie contacted the investigators and told them everything. The homicide detectives interrogated Adrian again and finally obtained the long-sought confession. All that remained was to locate Kate's body. On Friday, November 18, 2011, authorities took Adrian to the farm. Handcuffed, Adrian led them to a wooded area within the pheasant hunting grounds and indicated where he had buried Kate. Despite the directions, the search was challenging, requiring ground-penetrating radar and search dogs. A forensic archaeologist also assisted in the delicate task. On the 5th day of digging, they found what appeared to be Kate's remains. Richard and Edward were the first to be notified, and although they were informed that formal identification was still pending, the news brought them a sense of closure. The doubts, anguish, and exhaustion they had endured for 4 years gave way to a feeling of relief. This relief grew when the forensic team confirmed the remains were indeed Kate's. The Gloucestershire police broke the news to the press and offered Richard and Edward a chance to speak about their harrowing experience over the past 4 years. Richard and Edward emphasized the difficulty of knowing who was responsible for Kate's disappearance while being unaware of the fate Adrian had chosen for her. They expressed their only desire was to give Kate the rest she deserved and to move forward with their lives. When asked about their feelings towards Debbie, Richard acknowledged that she was now in a position similar to theirs, finally forced to face a terrible truth. The family held Kate's funeral on January 4, 2012, choosing to keep it strictly private. It had been 4 years and 2 months since her brutal murder, but Richard said they were relieved to have closure. By then, the veil that once clouded Debbie's judgment had lifted, and she understood the manipulative nature of Adrian. In media interviews, Debbie stated she was certain Adrian had used her and their young daughter to portray a false image of a responsible and loving family man. As of 2024, the once powerful English landowner remains behind bars. The farm was sold by Kate's brothers, with the proceeds going to a local hospital and to Kate's nieces and nephews. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.